Mogen sie immer.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dear colleagues from Flanders and Brussels, dear colleagues from all over the world, I am Director of Luisterpunt the Flemish Library for persons with print disabilities. And it's a pleasure and a great honor to welcome all of you at this symposium, organized by Luisterpunt and by the LPD section of IFLA. You will hear our LPD chair, Kirsten later on today. I am very happy with such a big number of participants. This means that the topics of this symposium have triggered your minds and have your full attention. I hope you will enjoy the symposium today very much, but also I hope you will find some time to enjoy our beautiful Brussels. We have not only beer and chocolate, as you met yesterday, but there are also nice old buildings and pretty musea. For example, from our world famous painter, René Magritte. And of course, we have also beautiful libraries, like the one you are in. This gives me the opportunity to thank the Chief Librarian of Muntpunt, Leen Lekens, who is also in the audience, for her hospitality today and the days before when Muntpunt was hosting the meetings of the LPD Standing Committee. I am quite sure that Muntpunt will be a very inspiring place for this symposium. Before we start, let me give you some practical arrangements. After the morning session, we have a 1-hour lunch break at 12:30, and lunch will be served just outside this meeting room. The afternoon session starts at 1:30 p.m. and ends at 3 p.m. At 3 p.m., we end the day with a short closing session to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Luisterpunt. Afterwards, we welcome you all with a reception which will be held where we had lunch. If you have any practical questions, please ask my colleagues. You will recognize them by their blue name badge. I now give the word to Saskia Woods, Operational Manager of Luisterpunt and Head of the Communication and Promotion Department. Saskia is also your chair of the day. She will introduce the speakers, keep an eye on the time, firmly and fair. She gives you also the possibility to ask questions and also comment on the topics and the presentations herself. Saskia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bart. Good morning.
Morning.
Everyone. Hi, Richard. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're all here with so many. This is a strange day for me. Organizing this symposium really gave me mixed feelings. Even my director, who always supports and encourages me, and I'm very grateful for that, furrowed his brows when I told him about the ideas and about my ideas, and I became a little insecure. But once again, he trusted me and let me proceed. So thank you again. But anyway, I never received so many questions and incomprehension, and at the same time, so many really enthusiastic reactions. So for me, this was a confirmation that I had made the right choices. Mainly, I made 2 choices. One about Guidelines 2.0 for public libraries. The second, I chose for Alice, Nancy, Rafiq, and Issam. Not so common target groups for libraries serving persons with print disabilities. First, let me start with the public libraries. As I wrote in the introduction text for this symposium, yes, for public libraries, because in unity there is strength. I strongly believe in collaboration, in partnerships. Also with Luisterpunt, we try to work together with all public libraries in Flanders and Brussels. We work together on an equal level. They don't have to pay for our services. We don't want a supplier-customer relationship. We want a partnership because we act together. And I believe very strong by the value of public libraries and librarians. They are always around the corner, very nearby and accessible. In Flanders, every child visits the library with parents, kindergarten, schools, for books, DVDs, read aloud activities or homework support. Now, what do I mean with 2.0 in Guidelines 2.0 for public libraries, most of the guidelines I know contain a substantial number of pages with a lot of chapters and background information, and I notice I don't read this anymore. I hear the same story from friends and from mostly younger colleagues. We search immediately for the relevant, more concrete part. We look for good practices and shared experiences. So I start to think, what really matters to me? Guidelines 2.0 must be accessible for library staff and tailored to the needs of a specific target group. So it depends on the target group how they will look like. Will they be visual, with infographics for instance, digital, audio, sign language. They have to be cut short and not too much background, introduction, forward, afterward, name it. And they have to be immediately applicable, concrete, useful, not theoretical or abstract. They have to contain good practices, shared experiences, good and bad, with hyperlinks to these good practices. And there must be a two-way traffic, or better, a many-way traffic, with colleagues, partnerships, stakeholders, target groups. They all can contribute. For instance, I was part of the project group who made the dyslexia guidelines in the IFLA context, and we couldn't use, it was in a template, and the template had a non-dyslexia friendly font. So we discussed about it, and we could change the font, but in the template you couldn't insert pictures. But you see this picture, it's two bookshelves. If you can show that in your guidelines and with the title, which bookshelf would you choose, I think it's more clear than you have to explain it in sentences that you have done. It's really hard to children with dyslexia to find a book with all the book spines, and it's very much easier and dyslexia friendly to show the covers of books. So also with the infographic, we made that afterwards, just to have some dyslexia more friendly overview of the guidelines. So we try to tailor it somehow, but it's not so easy. And now we arrive at our not so common target groups with Alice, who is deaf, Nancy, who suffers from dementia, and Rafiq and his son Issam, who are new in our country. We start with Alice, who is 16 and deaf. My own awareness awakened in 2014 when some colleagues and myself took a study trip through Sweden, where we visited several public libraries and MTM, the Swedish Agency for Accessible Media. There I noticed that all public libraries we visited had books and DVDs in sign language on their Apple shelf. That's how the easy-to-read area in Sweden is called. I had never seen that before, never ever, and I was triggered. I wanted to find out why books in sign language appeared on those Apple shelves, and why libraries had only books for children, and why did I never saw it somewhere else? I still don't know all the answers to these questions. But I know now that the reading ability of a deaf child depends on several things. Were Alice's parents deaf? Did Alice go to a school for deaf children? Then she grew up in and with an accessible visual language, her language, sign language. If not, and if Alice's parents weren't deaf, then she was confronted with an inaccessible home language. Did her parents learn or learn not sign language? The reading ability and the amount of words children know by a certain age, the age children learn to read, for instance, depend on so many circumstances. Alice was still learning to express herself, to pick up her language, vocabulary in sign language, when she already had to start with book vocabulary, which is more complex and abstract. In Flanders, a few, too little, libraries have books with information about deafness or sign language, but even worse, they don't have books, DVDs or e-books with or in sign language. And they exist also in Flanders. You can find, for instance, some books for toddlers on YouTube. How difficult is it, or how much time does it take to put a hyperlink in the library catalog? But I'm sure libraries don't know about these accessible versions, and why libraries do not invite a sign language interpreter at their read-aloud activities. I will show a short piece of the book Anna in the Zoo from Kathleen Anand. Yes, Ethan, so. I move on to Zorbib. The baseline of Zorbib, a special library connected to Red Cross Flanders, is more than a book. If I have to translate Zorbib, I should say care library. How beautiful is that? For ages, Zorbib has taken care of library services in residential care centers, such as hospitals, elderly homes, and asylum centers. Together with many volunteers, the staff provides books and friendly talk. But they noticed that it was hard to reach Nancy, who suffers from dementia, with a normal or regular book. More and more, occupation therapists ask for good reminiscence pictures for Nancy and other people suffering from dementia. Those pictures allow them to bring back memories in a structured way. Because they couldn't find good material in Flemish context, they made it themselves. In a few years, they have turned into specialists in the matter at hand. A wide range of beautiful materials that often remain out of sight of public libraries. And last but not least, we meet Rafiq and his 6-year-old son, Issam. Many libraries in many countries play an important role in newcomers' lives. Usually, it starts with a guided visit to the library in the context of an integration and or language course. The library is mostly a warm place where newcomers come for all kinds of help and counseling, for language classes and conversation tables, or just to read the daily newspaper and drink a nice warm coffee. These books can be great tools to learn the language of the new country, read and listen at the same time with a correct pronunciation and different reading speeds. In Flanders and Brussels, for example, a number of books in simple language are available in DAISY for people learning Dutch. This is possible thanks to the collaboration with the authors and the publishers. This selection of books is, however, very limited. While so many DAISY books are available, is this a missed opportunity for the Marrakesh Treaty? Do we all have to negotiate again with policymakers and publishers? And what's the story of the libraries? How and with whom do they collaborate to take care of Rafiq and Issam? To make them feel welcome and help them to build or rebuild a nice daily life in the new neighborhood. Only last Friday I received this email from a teacher. It was such a coincidence. She said she wanted to use DAISY books for children with dyslexia, and she asked in her email, can I use the books from Luisterpunt for non-Dutch speaking children? In my opinion, they have a reading disability because of their language delay, and they can benefit from audio support while reading. We share the opinion. So, what can public libraries, adapted materials, and accessible activities mean for Rafiq, Issam, Nancy, and Alice? And how can libraries serving persons with disabilities and other specialized libraries contribute? We are used to broadening our horizon and as specialist libraries. In many countries, the target groups of people with a print disability has been expanded. We reached out to print disabilities such as dyslexia, physical disabilities such as MS, to mental disabilities, to aphasia, etc. Do we want to do more? To reach out and help other target groups? We don't have to do everything by ourselves. Can't we collaborate and bring people, needs, libraries and organizations together? Isn't it our goal that everyone feels welcome in the public library, that everyone finds a customized library service for him or her? Those are the main questions today. All of those questions all about inclusion, a word we like to use, many maybe too often and too quickly. So I hope you are as interested as I am to hear different but interesting and inspiring stories, practices and experience. So now let's start with Alice. I asked our colleagues from MTM to share their Swedish example, and they hesitated, as if their story wasn't interesting enough. I tell you, they are too modest. I think they are used to such high-level standards that they don't realize anymore that they are doing such a great job. So now I give the word to Christina Passat, librarian and head of the unit for acquisition at MTM in Sweden. She will tell us more about MTM's work with the public libraries and their Apple shells, and about how libraries distribute books in sign language.
Thank you, Saskia. I was modest, yes, and I still am. But thank you for having me in the wonderful city of Brussels and wonderful libraries. My name is Christina Passad, as Saskia told you, and I come from the Swedish Agency for Accessible Media. It's called Myndigheten för tillgängliga medier, and this is our logo, MTM, in dots. And I will tell you a little bit about what MTM does and what we'd like to do and the situation today. We work closely with the Old Swedish Library in Sweden, but there's so much more to do actually. MTM and sign language literature, which is quite a new target group for us. There are literature in Sweden in sign language, but not as much as we would like to have. This is a slide showing a picture of a sign. I don't know the sign. And our vision is a society in which all reading is accessible, and a motto for MTM is with leading or extensive knowledge and the user in focus, MTM promotes accessible reading in society. The motto and the vision are new. We changed them last year because we used to focus on accessible media. We think accessible reading is a better term for us. And our assignment from the government is that we shall work for everyone's access to literature and information about society based on the individual's conditions regardless of reading ability or impairment. MTM does this in collaboration with libraries and schools in Sweden. We publish and distribute easy-to-read literature as a complement to the commercial market. And we also act as a national knowledge center for accessible media. And we also improve the accessibility to the content in newspapers to persons with an impairment. And we also have an assignment about the different sort of formats and the different sort of literature that we produce. And we shall promote sign language literature. And you might compare that word promote to what we do with the other formats, which is produce, buy, sell and distribute. That is, for example, braille and talking books. So there's a difference between those two. And in Sweden there's another national agency called the National Agency for Special Needs Education and Schools. And they have an assignment saying that they shall concerning study material, promote and inform children, young people and adults with an impairment about the accessibility of study material. The agency may develop, adapt, produce and distribute study material when the need for this material is not met by the commercial market. So that's actually the difference between those two agencies. Of course, there should be, but there is a great difference between the two of us, between MTN and SPSM, as is the Swedish word for them. And so far, MTN has interpreted our assignment in the way that we put material that SPSM has produced into our digital catalogue called Legimos. So MTN, we don't produce any sign language literature ourselves at all. And of course we have the law to tell us, to support us. We have the library law, and in paragraph 5 we have the priority groups. Persons with disabilities and persons with other native languages than Swedish are prioritized in the Swedish law. And sign language, lots of people see sign language as a native language. And we also have a language law saying that if you belong to one of the 5 minority languages, their groups, or if you have sign language as your native language, then you have a right to learn, use and develop Swedish sign language. There's actually other acts in the Swedish legislation to support us in what we do. And the uses of sign language in Sweden, there are about 30,000 people, and it's a group of lots of different people actually. You might be born deaf, or you might have a hard of hearing as you grow older, and you might be a hearing child, but you are born to deaf parents. And you might use the cochlear implant if you want to, which makes you able to hear a little bit more. But you still want to learn to use the sign language. And in Legimers, the uses of Legimers, it's important for us that they are a beneficiary person, which means that you have a reading impairment. Regardless of your disability, if you have reading impairments, that then you can use Legimers. And there's a difference there, discussion. If you have a reading impairment, if you're deaf, some deaf persons would say, I don't have a reading disability. No, that's all very fine. But if you have a reading disability, you are welcome to use Legimers. And some history then. 50 years ago in Sweden, I'm so ashamed to say that kids at school were not able to use their sign language. And the technical conditions, as you might know about, it's been so much more easy to look at videos and so on. In 1980s, the videos came around into everyone's home, which is a good thing. And the cost is very, very costly to produce a sign language book. It's about 100,000 euros to produce a sign language book, at about 250 pages. And that might be the answer to the problem of there not being very many titles of sign language in Sweden. Yeah. So Legimers are a catalogue on the internet. There are more than 130,000 titles of accessible media, like talking books and braille in the catalogue, but only 148 titles of sign language, and 43 of these are adult titles. And the adult titles there are about portraits of Swedish writers, and the children's literature are like fiction, fairy tales. And they are all produced by this other national agency I mentioned, SPSM. And they are distributed on the DVD so that the libraries, they download the titles and burn them on DVD and then give it to the users. And the total number of downloads since 2011 is 692. Now, this might not tell you very much, but the circulation rate is 0.2, and we usually figure with 2 or 3 for the circulation rate, that's okay, then the catalogue and the collection is fine. But this low circulation rate means that these titles are not very much used. They are not downloaded from the industry very much. Now the public libraries, as Saskia told you about, nearly all of them have an Apple shelf, and the Apple shelf is usually very close to the entrance of the library, and on the Apple shelf there's all the materials, accessible materials for children and young people and for their parents about lots of different reading disabilities, and they put their sign language books on these shelves as well. And the public libraries, either they download the titles from Legmus or they buy them from producers or publishers. There's about 4 or 5 publishers in Sweden that produce sign language books. And the school libraries, now there's about 6 schools in Sweden for hard of hearing kids or deaf kids. And if you go to that kind of school, of course the school library has lots of material for you. And the other libraries, the school libraries, they have materials for all of their kids, of course. There might be an ordinary school, but you go to a hard of hearing class, and they have material as well. They have special shelves for these kind of materials. And the school libraries, they also buy their books from producers or publishers, or they use Legmus. Now, in last year, 2017, we wanted to investigate if we can produce sign language ourselves at MTM, because that's what we would like to do. So we had a consultant in, and we had a lawyer in to check the legislation for us. And one of the first things that this consultant did was to try and give us a definition of what a sign language book is. And this is not an official definition of it. Sign language literature is literature presented with sign language and has to be understood as a literature where signs, facial expressions and gestures are organized linguistically, like a literature of the body, with the aim of giving the recipient a story. I don't know if you would agree, but that's the definition that came up. And this pilot study also presented 4 different groups of sign language literature, which is quite interesting. The first group is printed books translated into sign language, and I think that what Saskia gave us an example of, which is fine, no problem. And the other group is dramatized books with pictures and or films. And then you might actually discuss what's the difference between a sign language book and a film. And the third group is sign language books with sound or subtitles. And of course those books are produced so that a deaf person can listen or watch the film or book together with someone who's not deaf. And the fourth book is books created directly into sign language. And our legislation also gives us different ways of handling those 4 different groups of books. Because you might say that the last group, number 4, when you produce a book directly into sign language, that is accessible, it's born accessible, but it's not accessible to other groups that are not deaf. So the plan we have for this year is that we'd like to develop the dialogue with representatives for the users of our product. We have to do that. We'd like to investigate the possibilities with the cooperation with SPSM, since they have so much more experience and they do this, they produce themselves. So we need to cooperate with them. And we also like to develop the dialogue about publishing this literature with other interested organizations, like the publishers in Sweden. And we have plans to deliver 1 adult title And that sounds very modest, but since it's very costly, this is what we'd like to do this year. Well, I think that's about it. Thank you so much. Questions? Do we have any questions?
Okay. First we hear the story of Richard, and then we have some questions afterwards. But just wait for a second. We'd like to thank you with a little present. And as you might know, Belgians have a sweet tooth, and we are a little surrealistic. So we try to combine those two characteristics in this big thing. Thank you very much. Thank you. So now, Richard Orr, the CEO of the DAISY Consortium, will present a project on books in sign language the DAISY Consortium developed together with UNICEF and Whitebone. Have they succeeded in creating a universal book which they aim for? So please, Richard, tell us all about it.
Thank you very much. Can I just check you can hear me, or do I need to adjust the microphone? Adjust it. How's this? Oh dear. Maybe I broke it. There we are. Thank you Geert, Len and Saskia for having me, and thank you everyone for showing up and hearing about the story of the project that we've been doing with UNICEF. And Saskia, you're in good company. You're in the company of the United Nations, who also are considering all the work that's been done around accessibility of textbooks over the years, but wanting to really extend the benefits of that to other people, maybe children and adults who have not had such provisions made available for them. According to UNICEF, they see textbooks as key to the education of all children, but particularly children with disabilities. They see that textbooks are not available or accessible to many children with disabilities, let alone the problems of distribution, the quality, the cost of textbooks that exist in the many countries that UNICEF works. And so there are existing issues with textbooks in many developing countries, for example, and so the issue of print disability and access for people with disability is often forgotten. But by bringing the things together and maybe using technology, one can solve both problems at the same time, of distribution, quality, and of accessibility. And so we come to UNICEF's vision of innovation, that of harnessing the technologies to ensure that all children can access books and have assistance with learning by producing both text and digital formats, but making sure that the digital textbooks can be accessible to all children using open source technologies and including guidelines and guiding principles. A little about the DAISY Consortium. Well, we've been going for more than 20 years, and our role is to develop technology solutions to enable access to information for people with disabilities. Many of you will know about DAISY titles as being maybe audio, but in fact the technologies allow for producing digital text in books and images as well, and we're not the CDs that exist in a CD player. We're all about the very latest reading technologies and publishing technologies as well. We work with the global brands like Apple and Microsoft and Google and so on, and Amazon, and we have partnerships with schools, universities and disability organisations all over the world, including in developing countries. And we're very proud that Luisterpunt is a member of the DAISY Consortium. So if we think about what an accessible digital textbook can do now, and here I'm thinking about a textbook that includes text and images and, as you will see, audio too. So not just a talking book, but something that has the text in there. So by using good approaches, it's possible to be able to give access using modifying the print so it's bigger, with sound, and with braille. So by being able to choose the size and the style of the text and magnifying the pictures, this is really helpful for people who have sight problems, who have dyslexia or other learning disabilities. And here on the screen I have an image of a young man with Down syndrome and a sight problem, and a tablet computer with a textbook on there, and the text has been made yellow and big, so it makes it easier for the person to read it and enjoy the book. It is also, with an accessible digital textbook, possible to read the text aloud, to use either narrated text or the text-to-speech within the device that is being used. And this is useful for people who are dyslexic or have other specific learning disabilities, for people who are blind or partially sighted. And here we have a picture of a friend of mine who comes from San Francisco. He's blind and he's reading a book actually in the street using his phone, and there's a picture of a regular smartphone with some headphones plugged into it. So these are features that can be used on standard technologies. And it's possible to read the text in the book and the descriptions of the images and tables using Braille, using a connected Braille device. So this is helpful for people who are blind or deaf-blind. And people who are deaf-blind are often forgotten and not paid enough attention to. And there's a picture of a blind person who is reading a book with a Braille display on his lap, sitting on a chair. But what then? And this is like Saskia's questions too, and why we're all here today. What about, for example, people who use sign language or who rely on easy to read? How does what we've produced through digital accessible textbooks address the needs of these user groups? And so UNICEF created a project with an innovation unit to explore this, and we were proud to partner with them. And there were many other organizations involved as well, including user groups in Paraguay, Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay also. And the intention wasn't to produce lots of books, it was really to create some prototypes to evaluate what the possibility of these different techniques were, and also to help us with some of the authoring guidelines too, because this isn't just a technology problem, it's about how do you do the signing, for example. Do you have the text as well as the images and the video? Do you try and synchronize it so that the highlighting is down to a word level, or do you do it for a whole page, and so on? And I'll have a couple of examples to show you. So we've developed some prototypes through the project. There's been lots of discussions with publishers and authors too, particularly of children's books. This has been done at some of the book fairs where publishers and authors show up. And it was great to be at the London Book Fair last year, where together with colleagues from UNICEF, we were able to meet with some authors and publishers of children's textbooks. And now really the stage we're at now is a lot more evaluation with end users, both with students and with teachers in schools, to see of the things that have been produced so far, which are really helpful to them and which are technically possible but not so helpful maybe. And as we'll see, we conducted expert workshops. Here's the first video I'm hopefully going to show you. This is The Cat in Boots, I think is the translation. This was a video that was a signed book that was done in Paraguay. There is a collaboration between Uruguay, Paraguay and Argentina. In fact, you're able to go on the web and find the website. You need an account to be able to see all the books, but there are a couple of samples that you can look at. Let's have, I'll start the video and then I'll do a bit of description as well as what's happening. And the video is, I want to say it's in Spanish, but maybe Paraguayan is a language, so it's in Paraguayan Spanish. Let's try that. So unlike the signed book we saw earlier, which was silent, this has some sound effects. We had some tinkly sounds there. Here is a picture of the page.
Los hijos del molinero se repartieron la herencia que les había dejado su padre.
What we see on the screen is a picture, an image of a picture book, a children's book, and there is a person next to it, and he is signing the
Es que el
text.
hermano mayor se había quedado con el molino y el segundo con el asno. Y claro, si trabajaban juntos, podían ganarse la vida honradamente.
The text is all shown on the screen. It's a bit small, but it's not highlighted or anything like this. It just shows the image of the book.
Comérselo con ajo y
But it's nicely narrated. It's got a good professional voice. So it's something that you could see that maybe someone who was hearing and someone who was deaf and hard of hearing could enjoy together. That wasn't me, that was the video. You'll hear there are some sound effects too, and the chickens seem to occur a lot in these examples I'm going to show you. The video has finished now, but as it did a move from one paragraph to the other, it showed an animation of the windmill moving around, and there's a farmer there, and I think maybe his moustache moved or something like this. So there's an effort to make it visually very interesting also. What I would say is that this is a book that is accessible to someone who is using sign language. It's accessible to someone maybe who can see the text and can listen to the text, but it's not completely accessible because what if you need the text bigger? You can't see that. What if you really need to go back and spell the text out? What if you are deaf-blind? You need to access to the text in Braille. But it's beautifully produced. And like we heard from Christina, the numbers are very low because the production costs are very high. So on the next slide I've moved to, there's a photograph of a conference event, and on the stage is someone who is giving a presentation using sign language. This was the workshop that was held at Gallaudet University in Washington, DC. And this is possibly the world's only university for deaf and hard of hearing people. The teachers, the principal, and many of the students, most of the students are deaf or hard of hearing. And so it was at this university we brought together international experts, users, teachers to talk about extending the benefits of accessible reading and textbooks around the place. It was very interesting to me to learn about the library. What is a library in a university for deaf people like? And it's like a library that you might see in another university. The books are regular print books. And what we learned, or what I understood from the discussions we had over these 2 days, was that the really important priority area was actually for young children's books, at the point at which children are acquiring language, and they're acquiring reading, print language, but also extending their knowledge of sign language also. And the children can learn 2 languages at once. This is well known, I'm sure very common in continental Europe, less common I'm afraid in England. And so it was seen as a very positive thing to have the mix of early reader type books with sign language along with them. And they said if we have one thing, it would be to have many more sign language books with the text as well for the young children as they're acquiring language. And as people who use sign language go through the education system, the need for that actually falls away. It's the young people. Now this is what we learned from the representatives who were at this session. One of the things we were able to do at the session was show some of the prototypes that we have developed through this project. So this is the second video I will hope to run, and again I'll describe what's happening. This is using a tablet, like a Samsung tablet I think. You can hear the book is being read. On the screen there is the text, and there's a little video square of someone who is signing the text as it's being read.
Some animals live in the trees around our homes.
This is also all about animals, and I think there are some chicken noises at some point too.
Look at these pictures.
And this isn't just a straight passage of text. Here, the person is moving from section to section and image to image, and quickly the speech is reading that relevant part, but also the sign language is synchronized with that. I don't think I showed it in that little piece of the video, but that video square of the person who is doing the signing, you can just touch it with your finger and move it around. So if it's covering a piece of book you don't like, you can stretch it to make it bigger or make it smaller too. So it's a dynamic revision. And here is the second video, and this definitely has chickens. I promised you chickens. This textbook prototype runs within a browser, so you can run it within Chrome or Firefox. But also, we found that it's about the overall experience, and we found that these e-reading solutions in a school environment with a busy teacher who has so many other things to think about has to be rock solid, and it has to be really simple to use. So we actually have this concept of a very simple to use digital textbook reader as well, that maybe simplifies the whole thing.
And 4, life around me is 1.
So far so
drawing
regular. It's a mixed digital textbook. Here the text-to-speech is describing, there are the chickens, describing the image of the farmyard.
Is the garden with edible plants and a stream beyond it next to other plants and trees. To the right is the family house with the mother on the porch. She is bringing one more plate with a roast chicken to the table. They'll itch with pain.
So now I'm moving through in this video through the text, as you would expect. But now I've moved to a menu and I've clicked a little button with two hands that are signing, and a video box has popped up, and I can click on the box and it will sign the relevant piece of text that's next to it. So it just signed Unit 4, Life Around Me, and then further down we have a section that's about caring for your nails, your fingernails. And so by clicking on that, this section is then signed. So you have the text with the signing alongside it. And what's different to this than the video books is, as maybe you saw at the beginning, the text can be read using the synthesizer. It can be made bigger. You could do word by word reading through it. You could read it with a braille display. So this is kind of closer to a universal book. You could change the colors and so on. I don't have a demonstration of it, but there is also a mode, it was in that little menu that came up, which is the simplified mode. So this brings up, instead of all of that text, it brings an easy to read version of the text, and it also has the table of contents in more of a kind of symbol type approach to it as well. So what have we achieved so far in this project that has been led by the visionary work of UNICEF? Well, these innovative reading software applications are currently under development. And we've got this first accessible digital textbook prototype in Brazil that is being tested and validated in 30 schools. That's starting just now. In Paraguay, to meet the need and the real thirst for there being more titles, 10 children's books with sign language and narration were launched. So more inclusive than just the sign books. And as I mentioned before, publishers and authors have been engaged to help them understand and extend the understanding of what accessible publishing can be like. So in conclusion, currently, as we know and are producing them today, digital textbooks provide great accessibility for many learners with disabilities, but not all. The existing technologies could be extended to include signed and simplified content. Those prototypes I showed you are based on well-used international standards, and it's not creating a new kind of direction that will be in competition or somehow different to existing standards and approaches. It builds on what has been achieved already and enables the same title, the same textbook, to be available not just to people who have no reading disability or may have low vision, blindness, deaf blindness, dyslexia or so on, but also to include more people who have cognitive, who are deaf or hard of hearing. But so far really we've been playing with the technology and coming with technology solutions. what is so important is that this is actually what people want. It works in a classroom, and it is solid and doesn't kind of break, and works in a practical sense too. So more evaluations with learners and teachers are required to ensure that the technical solutions solve the human issues. So that's me. I will be around at lunchtime, of course, and any other breaks. And I have a couple of these textbooks on my computer, so if you wanted to experience them, I'd be happy to show you those.
All right. Thank you, Richard. So in the spirit of my plea for Guidelines 2.0, it's obvious that I expect some interaction from the audience. So is there someone who wants to add something or ask a question to Richard or to Christina? Please feel free.
Yes, Richard, thank you for your interesting good project. I was wondering whether it's possible to share the prototypes with interested parties in Europe, for instance, to have a look at it, but also to show it to interested groups.
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer, but I do know that it's easy to share from a technical point of view. I've just been sent a link and downloaded it. So I will ask the people who are running the project and have paid for it to see whether that's something that they're happy to do. So I'm happy to do that.
Usually it's not the technology, it's the other barriers.
There we are. Thank you for the question.
Someone else? Not for a moment, we're just rolling up. All right. So thank you, Christina and Richard. So, now we'd like to visit 60-year-old Nancy, who suffers from dyslexia. What can we do to make her happy? As I said, Roadbed has become a specialist in taking good care of Nancy, and I'm glad that staff member of Roadbed, will introduce their collection of adapted materials for Nancy and her housemates at the elderly home.
For the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation as well. Good morning to you all. My name is Rafiq. Can you all hear me fine? And I work for the Flemish Red Cross. And now when people think of the Red Cross, they usually think of emergency relief or humanitarian aid in disaster areas. But the Flemish Red Cross is also there for people with maybe a less acute need for help, but not less important. People like, for example, Nancy, who have dementia and who reside in a nursing home. She will probably receive excellent care, but the activities in the nursing home and her family and friends may not be enough to fill the day. And this is where Roadbed and all its volunteers come to the picture. What is Roadbed exactly? You can translate it literally as a care library. We are part of the humanitarian services of the Red Cross Flanders, and we are funded by the Flemish government to organize a library for target groups. Our policy mission is to bring a library service and social contact for people who cannot make it to the public library temporarily or for a longer time because they reside in a residential care. For example, we are active in general hospitals, in psychiatric hospitals, centers for asylum seekers, and also, unfortunately, retirement homes. Our central library is situated in Mechelen, just 30 minutes from here. There we acquire our collection, we store it, and we also distribute it to our library ones. how does this work? Well, at the request of a care facility, we organize a library point at their location. This means we deliver a set of books, CDs, DVDs, comic books, games, basically anything you can find in a public library. And we tailor this collection to the needs and interests of the patients or residents. A collection is about 150 materials on average. This collection is decided about in agreement with the care staff, and we change part of this collection twice a year, so that the residents can also always make use of an up-to-date collection. Now, the library point itself is run entirely by local Red Cross volunteers. And this can look something like this. So our volunteers, on average twice per month, according to their own free time available, they go from room to room and they visit their readers, offering a book. They stack their trolley with books, CDs, DVDs, and everything, and they also have a chat with their readers. And this chat is actually a key element in the service of Zoidberg. Our slogan is a book and a visit, and this sounds a lot better in Dutch because it rhymes, a boek en een bezoek. And we go as far as saying that the books is not the main thing here, it's just a means to an end, a means to social contact. This also means that if a person is not really interested in taking out a book, it does not matter, because your visit might have already brightened their day, so to speak. That is why the social contact is also a key element in our training for volunteers. We teach them how to deal with maybe difficult subjects that might come up during such a visit, and also to draw boundaries. If, for example, a patient asks you to perform some tasks that are not really part of your duty, such as medical tasks or some small household tasks. Currently, we have 900 volunteers working all over Flanders for Zoidberg, and we are active in 370 care facilities. In our head office, also situated in Mechelen, we, as I said, manage this whole collection. We give support to the local libraries, and we develop trainings and guidelines for our volunteers. And where necessary, we can always count on the help of our Center for Evidence-Based Practice. Now, Zoidberg goes a long way back. It was actually founded in 1937. And so it also changed a lot according to the changes in society and the medical sector in particular. And today I want to go over a couple of these recent evolutions that really impacted the way we work today. Now, the last 10 years, we saw, first of all, a decrease of Zoidberg activity in general hospitals. Now, why is this? As you know, people are now kept as shortly as possible in a hospital after surgery. You are encouraged to go and recover at home as soon as you can. This means, of course, that when you're in the hospital, you're usually not well enough to read a book. And so our service went down. Or people prepare themselves and they bring their own book or laptop or tablet and so on. But on the other hand, we experienced also a considerable increase in our activity in retirement homes. And today it is to such an extent that 2/3 of our library points are situated in retirement homes, and new memberships are also all coming from these nursing homes. This also ties in, to give you a little background, with the new views around elderly care. Before, you can maybe say that care was mostly situated around the body, taking care of the body, whereas now it is more widely to take care of the person as a whole, creating a new home. And being at home also means having access to recreation options and also a library. Now, of course, this development has big consequences for Zoidberg. First of all, we saw the average age of a reader climb up to 85 years old, because that's the average age of a nursing home resident nowadays. This also means that our readers have higher care profiles. But you are encouraged, as you know, to also live at home as long as you can. So by the time you move to a residential care, you usually need extensive care. This meant for us that we saw that we could reach ever fewer people by our classical library service due to visual problems of our users, but more and more also due to concentration problems and even worse, dementia. And we were prepared for an elderly audience. We had large print books, we also had an extensive DAISY collection, but we noticed that in the case of dementia, also these collections could no longer provide an answer. But as you know, our books were never really the main goal, and the need for social contact in this target group remained actually unchanged. So it's not a bit, we did not conclude, well, okay, maybe there's a part of our audience we cannot reach anymore. We just thought, if not with our classical library service, then how else? And this led to a lot of researching, a lot of browsing, a lot of interviewing, and in the end we came up with 2 new collections at Consortium. But before I introduce these to you, I would maybe like to zoom in just a little bit more on dementia. What is it exactly, and how does it impact someone? First of all, dementia is not really a disease. It's rather a set of symptoms of mental decline. 60 to 80% of dementia is made up of Alzheimer's disease, the remainder of vascular dementia. Now, without going into medical details, the main symptom is memory loss. Now, as we all live longer, the prevalence of dementia worldwide will also rise. Currently, there are 50 million people with dementia globally, and this number is expected to triple by 2050. Now, one of the most striking symptoms of dementia is also that the earliest memories stay intact the longest. And this is a typical case where you might ask someone with dementia, what did you have for breakfast? And I cannot tell you, but when you show them a childhood picture, for example, elementary school, they can point you where their best friend is on their picture and what their name was. And the Dutch dementia specialist, Huub actually explained this in a very comprehensive way. He called this the rollback effect of dementia. And he says you can think of your memory as a shelf of diaries. And for each year that you live, you put a diary on the shelf. Now what dementia does is it makes these diaries fall over, starting with the most recent volumes. And so in a domino effect, as the dementia progresses, all the diaries will gradually fall over. In the first shelf on this drawing, you see someone with the early stages of dementia. So only the most recent diaries, let's say, have fallen over. The second shelf, you see someone with more advanced dementia. And all the memories, let's say, up to 10 years old, have been disarranged or disappeared, crumbled away. Now we can ask ourselves, why is it exactly that these earliest memories, so the ones that go furthest back, stay intact the longest? And in other words, what makes for a strong memory? And what research has found is that what imprints something in your brain is actually an event combined with a strong emotion. This really anchors something. And what you find is that these first decades of your life are typically filled with these kind of events combined with strong emotion. And researchers call this the decades of the first times. Your first time to the big school, your first car, first time married, first baby, and so on. And this would explain why these things are so present in your brain for such a long time. Now, I don't know if you came across this, but 2 weeks ago, a journalist of the New York Times published an article about exactly that. He found that the songs you loved as a teenager, you usually love until the very end. And how he came about this, he actually made a list of all the songs that topped the Billboard charts between 1960 and 2000. And then he matched it with all the age groups who downloaded this music on Spotify. And what he found was that people tended to download the songs most that were a hit when they were at early puberty. Funny detail, this differed a bit for men and for women. Women tended to already find their favorite song at age 13, men at 14. So you can think for yourself what your theme song is. Anyway, bottom line was that if you love as a team, you will love wherever. Okay, so we talked until now about the, let's say, the things you lose when dementia affects you, loss of cognitive abilities. Yes, that's true. But what I found by interviewing a lot of occupational therapists in these nursing homes was also that as the logical world maybe crumbled, the sensory world only gained in importance. And this means concretely that people with dementia became even more sensitive to pleasant music, a pleasant touch, evocative and nice smells, vibrant color, movement, and so on. And also, and this I found striking, they were also more sensitive than before to a good atmosphere and positive emotions surrounding them. And one therapist actually summed this up very nicely for me. She said, a person with dementia might not always remember who you are, but they will always remember how you make them feel. So it's important to pay attention to that in your visits. So all this research and browsing led to the collections, as I already said, and I would like to go over them with you now. We created, first of all, a reminiscence collection, and secondly, a more activity-oriented collection. Now, as you know, to reminisce means nothing more than to recollect memories in an active way. And in this collection, we gathered photo books, magazines, music CDs and DVDs, for documentaries and movies, all with the goal to trigger these memories of the younger years. Now, as you can imagine, this collection is alive because it has to shift along with the age of your audience. And right now, our material covers largely the 50s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, because those are the decades that our reader was, let's say, a child or a young adult at the time. But over the years, this will start to include material of the 70s and 80s, and so on. The popular themes in this collection are, let's say, the popular themes of life. Your school days, your village, the town you came from, your wedding day, your job, your hobbies, pets, radio, television, and movies, and so on. But I want to stress that it doesn't always have to be historical material. We found that more universal themes, so to speak, also work very well. For example, footage of nature, of animals, children, or popular holiday destinations. But the most important thing when making up such a collection is that it's recognizable for our audience. This is key, and it's really in the details as we discovered ourselves. For example, at one point we had a lovely DVD in our collection about interiors and houses in the 50s. It was a Dutch production with historical footage, and we noticed that this DVD was not very well liked by our users. Why? And the feedback that we got was that it was just not recognizable. The houses in the Netherlands, yes, they look the same, but also not really. Same for the street view, is the same but also different. And all these small differences caused that our audience it just did not ring a bell. So you need such a detail actually only to make the publication not successful. So the more local content you can find, the better. For example, local history groups that maybe publish picture books of the region, that makes for excellent material. For example, this book we have in our collection by the Belgian coast. It matches pictures of the old days and how it looks now. And what we find in general that this collection makes for excellent conversation with the users and together with the volunteers. Stories come very easily. This material is also often suitable for reading aloud. Another publication that's successful, Electrical Appliances of Back in the Day. And it often has also a sort of, how can I say, empowering effect. because often the older people will have to explain to the younger volunteers what is actually seen on these images. We may not even know anymore what that contraption there at the bottom is for, and they will. As Saskia announced, at one point we also went on an adventure because indeed we could not find enough local material to fill this collection with. And so we started to produce our own reminiscence video clips. And we did this together with the Flemish Centre of Expertise on Dementia and also Roadbed College in Bruges. I have to add that we stopped with the production. Why? This was too time consuming for us as a library. But the clips were, however, published in a wonderful method for reminiscing with people with dementia. And this publication you can have a look at if you want later. It's on display in the back. And we also distributed it to all our volunteers and who wants to work with. It's really a manual. Second collection we designed was a more activity-oriented collection. And the biggest difference is that it's not meant to be used individually. Like the reminiscence collection you could actually enjoy individually. This has to be worked with together with, in our case, a volunteer, but it can also be a caregiver, a family member, or an occupational therapist. We chose specifically for material that was not exclusively designed for therapeutical use. We are not medical staff. The collection is just there to facilitate the social contact that volunteers have with our users. And I will just show you some examples of what you can find in this collection. We have reminiscence puzzles. These are puzzles with, as you see, an adult theme, so nothing childish. So that in the end, when the puzzle is complete, can also be a trigger for a nice conversation or some memories. The pieces are few and also of a solid material. We also have creative material, aqua paint, something really magical when you see it at work. You start with a blank page, but as you go over it with a brush with just water, an image appears. And it also disappears again as the water dries, so you can use it endlessly, so to speak. And also, again, the images that appear are suitable for adults. It's actually specially designed for people with dementia. Now remember how smell and sound is a powerful trigger for memories. We have a method called Senscapes with an audio CD, in this case of sounds of the seaside, and also a small set of bottles with seaside smells such as suntan lotion, and what else was there? The smell of engines, even of boats. It's wonderful what they can make. And you can just use this as a trigger for your conversation. We also have conversation cards, extra large board games. And these are just a couple of sentences, let's say. Now, an extra collection also meant for the Red Cross extra coaching for our volunteers. Because the bottom line is, this reminiscence and activity materials are only as good as the one working with it. Without a volunteer or family member actively engaging with this material, with the user, it's just material on the shelf. And we said earlier, okay, our collection is a means to social contact, but of course this social contact is much more intense than just a classical book round. And that is why we are now developing additional training for our volunteers. And we will prepare them for setting up a reminiscence activity, selecting the right material for your users, because it's very personal what is a pleasant subject for one person and not for the other. Creating a good setting, learning about conversation techniques, and especially with people with dementia, and how to respond to, again, sensitive subjects or difficult memories that may come up in such a conversation. That is what I wanted to tell you today. If you want more information, please look us up at our website. You can also email me directly. Also be here for the rest of the day. And please, if you like, you can have a look at our sample collection at the back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for some questions. If someone wants to ask something, but it was an amazing story.
Thank you very much.
Then.
Hello. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. I have actually two questions. The first is about how to collect the material. You mentioned on one moment local history groups.
Yes.
I guess that this is quite an important partner because if you want to have this reminiscence material
Yes.
as close to patients, to people
Right.
in your residences,
Yes.
could you tell something more about how you work or try to work or will work in the future with local heritage groups or
Exactly that, yes. So it started with you're right. It started with a lot of browsing, trial and error, and we noticed that a lot of these local publications you could not find in the regular bookshop, so you really have to turn to local bookstores and just create a network basically. And that's how we went about it. And we're also now collaborating, starting as a pilot, in our National Heritage Organization. And they are actually, we found, a great central contact that have an overview of everything that's available in these local history groups. Yeah, so it's about really setting up a network. Also exploring further digital collections, and that's for the future. And that's something we're thinking about as well.
Okay, could I just add one more question?
Yes.
Actually, do you intend to work, or could it be interesting to work in the future with local public libraries?
Yes, and in which sense are you thinking?
Well, to get to have the material as close as possible to people who could use it, because as far as I understand it now, the material is mainly intended to be used by professionals.
By volunteers, actually.
By volunteers,
yeah, with assistance
but in
of professionals.
semi-professional context.
Right, right.
I have a recollection of my grandmother, and I was sitting there. She was suffering from dementia, and I never knew what to talk about.
Yeah.
It would be great, so to say, to have some of this material at your disposal, to work with it
Exactly.
as a member, as a family, as a relative of.
Right. Yeah. And actually, for individual use, I would say your public library is your first place of expertise for this, because they should know most actually about local publications. So, as an individual, I would definitely say it's the first place to turn to. Yes.
You do not, or this material is not distributed yet through, or
Yes.
that might be a plan. Or
We're thinking about this actually, but it's not concrete enough to already. We don't really have a format for that yet, but we are thinking of working really together with local libraries and also people in their home context. Yes, but that's for 2018, 19, and so on. Yeah, but it's in the plans, definitely. Yes, thank you.
And another question for you.
Thank you so much for your interesting presentation. I have an additional question. If you're planning to work with local public libraries, would there also be an opportunity to give information sessions to people who have parents or grandparents who are suffering from dementia and could be helped by this collection?
Yes, I think in fact it would be a great opportunity to just share expertise. In Dutch we say we don't all have to invent the warm water ourselves, so why not share? And indeed, I noticed that public libraries have two needs. It's first of all the collection and how to adapt it for people with dementia. And second, indeed, how to work with it, and also how to have volunteers work with it. So if we could share our expertise with in training local library volunteers, why not? Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Another question from the audience? No? No one? Okay, thank you very much.
Anyway, we will share the presentations on our website and on the LPD website. There's also a live stream on YouTube of this symposium, so if you want to hear some things again, you have the opportunity. And we, Roadbed and Luisterpunt, are used to work together for several things, so we keep in contact, and we also, together we will do that, inform the public libraries. Because also, when we were organizing the symposium, there were a lot of libraries who told me, I can't make it on the 28th of February, but I'm so interested in this story of Roadbed. So, yeah, I think you have the interest of many public libraries and scholars. The last speaker of this morning is Stan Kallewaard. He's a staff member, Reading Promotion and Diversity at the Brussels Public Library Network. He will talk about public library services for newcomers, about trying to give Rafiq and his son Issam a warm welcome in the library. He has years of experience with Read Aloud projects in Brussels, from activities in libraries to read to children with a different home language at their homes. So, Stan, kindly invite you.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Stan. Maybe I try to adjust this a little bit. Make it easier. Actually, I want to start thanking Saskia and Geert, and this is not really easy to have. Yeah. I need some help. I prove not to be strong enough to have this.
Maybe I'm not right.
She's a strong lady.
Yeah. So I want to start with a word of thanks for Saskia and Geert for inviting me, but actually in inviting me, Saskia and Geert invited 20 public libraries. Because I'm working with the 20 and 20 public Brussels public libraries. So let's start with that. I try to be the spokesman of these 20 libraries. A number of colleagues are in the audience today. 20 Flemish libraries, for people who know Brussels a little bit. We're a split country, no, not a split country, a country with at least 2 communities, 3 official languages. In Brussels, these communities live together, work together, but in split systems. Which means that if we have 20 Flemish libraries, there are 3 times as many French libraries. As there are different school systems, you have French schools, you have the Dutch, Flemish schools, you have cultural organizations in both languages, so you have libraries, the Flemish libraries and the French libraries. I won't go deeper into detail, this would lead me too far, and actually I'm not prepared to do that today. Anyhow, these 20 libraries work in a super diverse context, and this is what I'm going to talk about today. They work in an integrated network. Well, I will not dwell too long upon that. We have a shared vision, or try to have a shared vision on what a library in the 21st century can be, what we can, for example, be, what is the role we can play for newcomers in our society. We have a number of common projects, and I'm going to talk about these projects. I'm going to present you 5 or 6 projects
in which we work with newcomers. So actually, I'm not working myself. In one of these libraries, I'm working for this support platform with like 7 or 8 colleagues working with and for these 20 libraries. Actually, the library in which we are host guests today is one of the 20 public libraries. Before I start exposing one of these 5-6 projects, I wanted to have with you just an eye on what diversity is. Who are Rafiq and Issam? Well, actually, they are the symbol today for diversity in our cities. The typical slide with the dichotomy at the left and the right side. Diversity in our cities, I think what needless to say that we live in super diverse cities. I do not know where it will come from, but these couple of figures I collected for you give an idea of what diversity can be. But always the tricky thing when you talk about nationality. That's an extremely tricky concept because so many people living in our cities do have the Belgian ID card or do not have the Belgian ID card. These 30, almost 35% does not say anything about people who have been living here for generations but who have diverse cultural roots. If we move to the right case, then, well, we have the question mark. How diverse? Yeah, well, we just have the numbers at the left side, which is like 1,191,000 inhabitants. These are figures from 2017. 34.8% people with a foreign nationality. 179 different nationalities, which is again 2017, and then a figure from 2014. I couldn't find any recent figure. Actually, approximately 30% of school children speak other languages than French or Dutch at home. This is a bit the idea of what diversity of Brussels, or I would say whatever city in Europe, in the world, what diversity, super diversity can mean. If we talk about diversity in the libraries, I actually put a question mark, because this is what it is all going to be about today. We talk about almost 41,000 customers. And here comes the split country, split Brussels situation again on the scene, because, well, we have, of course, these French libraries in Brussels as well. And I was not able to have the recent figures for the numbers of customers at the French sites. A number of years ago, we had like 80 to 90,000 customers in the French libraries, which, if you add these figures, you have like 1 out of 10 inhabitants in Brussels is a member of a public library, which I deem is not a very high rate, I would say. We could do much better. If we look at nationalities, well, approximately 150 different nationalities with the same remark about how tricky nationality is. If we have a look at our collections, we have like almost 12% of books in other languages, which may seem to be like quite an interesting figure. I don't know what the reactions in the audience would be. But if you have a closer look at this figure, we see that once you subtract the main Western European languages from this almost 12%, if you subtract English, French, Spanish, maybe Portuguese, we have a poor 2%, not even 2% left of collections in the not so common or the not Western European languages. If you look at Arabic, at Bulgarian, Armenian, Urdu, Farsi, and so go on, we not even attain the 2%. So
So I end the slide with the prophetic words, a long way to go. A long way to go for the diversity, to have a more diverse library, at least in Brussels. I can only speak for Brussels. We can have a discussion later on if you have absolutely different experiences in your country, in your cities. It would be nice to talk about this. A next slide about what is actually in the word public. Well, it's a more theoretical, abstract thing as well. Once again, left and right sides. The has-been attitude or vision of what the library could be, just like being there. We're there and people come to our libraries, very organization and service-based vision of what the library could be. On the right side, it's actually more the way we want to work in the future. We try to work in this manner already, and I think many people working in public libraries will recognize this. It's like outreaching, working in an outreaching manner, trying to go to places where your customers are. And if you talk in the context of newcomers, which is the topic of this lecture, well, I think it is extremely important that we go to places where newcomers actually are, where they live, where they work, where they meet. If we remain within the walls of our library, we may not have many newcomers actually visiting us. And actually, maybe one thing I want to point out in this slide is the human rights vision. We could consider a public library as a fundamental right, because a public library still is guaranteed access to books, to culture, to leisure, information, etc. This is sort of the main point of this slide. What now is the role public libraries can play for Rafiq and Issam? A number of examples I promised you, and maybe I have to ask Saskia to give me a sign in time when I'm getting it. Okay. 5 to 6 projects I want to present to you. Projects most or all the Brussels libraries, so the Dutch libraries, are involved in. First one, known to, well, I would say, I would hope to all of you, a Bookstart project. Bookstart was invented actually in the UK. Has been playing a role all over the world. So many countries, so many public libraries have Bookstart initiatives. The central idea is give the message to parents that it is never too early to start reading with your child. A good start, it's all about a good start for children. So from the age of 6 weeks on, we encourage parents to start reading with their children. How do we do that? Well, actually, through the collections, all the libraries have specific, typical baby book collections, the cartoon books, the plastic books, etc. We try to be present, and we actually are present in all the Brussels family centers. Family centers, you have an idea, I guess, what family centers can be. These are the places where young parents go with their child, mainly for the medical aspects. It's about vaccination, etc. These family centers are extremely important to us, because actually the whole world is coming to family central. If we do not happen to have Rafiq and Issam among our customers yet, we will find Rafiq and Issam in the family center, because he and or his wife will come with the younger brother or sister of Issam to the family center. We have small book collections in all these family centers, so that the volunteers and professional staff, we try to go by in these family centers as often as possible. We go by in these family centers to work with young parents and to show what a book can be, what a book can do with a young child. We have close collaboration with not all, a reasonable number of kindergartens for the moment, and this is a part of the project we'll try to extend in the future. Special attention we give to training of professionals. We organize, on a regular basis, trainings for library staff about communication, about the importance of books for young children. It's a bit the background, and it's very much based on communication skills as well. This is one of the main topics of our trainings. The second project, which is less known, which is less widespread, it's a project that started 21 years ago in Brussels. It's called the Book Squad, Boek Squad at Home, Boekenbende aan huis. It's a project in which the libraries send volunteers, actually we call them reading ambassadors, to the families. Like each year we have 250 to 300 people so the libraries can send to families, and these readers go for a limited number, it's 5 to 10 times, they go reading in the families. The families we select for this project are mainly newcoming families. We try to send our reading ambassadors in these families to show them what books can be, what books can mean for a child, to give sort of a good example, the role model, work with books, show to parents that their child loves books. So this is one part of the project. Second part of the project, of course, is to have these families to make them familiar with the public library. For many newcomers, the very concept of what a public library actually is not automatically given. We sometimes, quite often, need to explain what a public library exactly is. It's not a shop. You become a member of the club in a certain way. You borrow books, you take them home, you bring them back. Well, that's part of the Boekenbende at Home project. It's a very intensive project, but it's a very satisfying project as well. We've been doing some research these previous years, and we see that actually the reading motivation of many children that have been read during these Boekenbende weeks, the reading motivation of many of these children increase in a very clear manner. It's an interesting project because it's a partner project. We work very closely with primary schools, elementary schools. We work with institutions of higher education. Many of our volunteers are actually students who take part in the Boekenbende and participate as a part of their curriculum at their university or whatever institution of higher education. A third project I want to present is the Brussels Reads Aloud. Brussels Reads Aloud was an attempt so many years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, of the Brussels libraries to have more attention to the home languages. What can we do with the home languages? How can we set this step? I refer to the third slide. How can we go and work in a more outreaching way? We came to the very basic, it's nothing revolutionary, basic idea that, we just try to have our reading moments, our reading aloud moments in the library in at least more than one language. We were used to organize Dutch, reading sessions only in Dutch. And then, it was like quite clear, and it was a bit the intuition of that moment. What if you try to have like multilingual? You can just sort of imagine this in a very concrete way. We read with two readers, 2 people are sitting in front of a group. One of the 2 is telling the story in Dutch. The second person is telling the story in another language. Do the professionals of the libraries know all these languages in which we want to read aloud? Of course not.
And this is one fundamental step. We went and out to libraries and we asked people, would you like to read aloud in the library? I remember that the first times we did this, well, colleagues present today in the audience went to people outside the library and asked, would you like to read? If I remember well, it was a sort of a risky thing. We were not sure whether this would be a successful project or whatever. But a bit to our surprise, so many people replied in an extremely positive way. And while looking back now, we just feel that so many people may have been looking for years to ways to work with the library. So many people were just pleased that they could do something for the library. We formed a group. We started with a little 5 to 6 people in a Brussels Reads Aloud group. There's a Facebook group, a closed Facebook group. We have people reading in Japanese, Arabic, Urdu, Polish. How does it work concretely? If a library wants to organize a bilingual or multilingual reading moment, well, the staff member just takes the phone or sends a message puts a message on the Facebook group, and we see who is available, who can come, and most of the times these people bring their own network with them. We had, for example, a Dutch-Armenian reading moment a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden a good dozen of Armenian-speaking children and parents in the library who never had been in the library before. Well, this is what the Brussels Reads Aloud project can realize. We once a year organize actually a festival. Then you have it's the 3rd week of November, the Reading Aloud week, and all the Brussels libraries have their multilingual Reading Aloud session in the library. From this activity part, Reading Aloud sessions, I move on to the collection part. We have been working for a number of years on an Arabic collection. That's why, well, this time has the title, the Arabic collection. Had there never been Arabic books before in the public libraries in Brussels? Well, yeah, there have been books in Arabic language before, but we actually chose those books, we selected those books ourselves. We never went to the public to ask what they would like to have in the library. And this is the complete, shift we made a number of years ago. We try to work for our collections in other languages than Dutch. We try to work as much as possible with the target group, people from the target group themselves. We just ask, we have like a resonance group, a working group. There are some 12 to 15 people, Arabic-speaking people in that group. And we have regular meetings, and we talk about the books these people would like to have in our libraries. And then we go and purchase these books. This is for the public libraries in Brussels. This was a shift. We're going to organize a training meeting within a couple of months, because we feel that many libraries are interested in this way of working. Once again, it's nothing revolutionary. It's just like, going out and ask your audience or your potential audience, what would you like to do something with us in the library? And we feel that there was an enormous, very enthusiastic response to our question. So our Arabic collection has been presented to the public last October. It's only 400 titles, but we see that the borrowing figures these last 4 months are quite high, and we see that there's a local promotion. People who know about this collection in 3 libraries, only in 3 libraries in Brussels, they make publicity, and new people are coming. And this is clearly a way in which we will continue to work.
So for the next years to come, actually in this moment we have a Russian collection which will work along the same guidelines, the same working lines as I just presented. We'll start with Romanian in another language. We might launch a similar part on Bulgarian. We're working with Spanish and Portuguese, always in dialogue with the audience as much as possible. Then I come to, I think this is the fourth or the fifth, project language courses. Saskia referred to it in her introduction. All libraries have, public libraries have language courses. Many languages, because public libraries are the places where customers, people come to follow a language course. This is like, well, a traditional aspect of our collections. We, as Brussels Libraries, especially worked on and invested in Dutch language courses. So in all these libraries, you find a how to learn Dutch collection. You see a picture down. We try to organize activities around this collection as well. Conversation tables, introductory visits to the libraries, etc. We try to work in a continuous manner on this collection, which I would say that actually in all these libraries you find a sort of the same grid, the same system. We have like a low, an easy level label system, so people can quite easily see whether the book or the language course they have in hand is rather a beginner's level or an intermediate level, etc. We work very closely together with a number of reference organizations here in Brussels for language learning, Dutch language learning. They help us to select the good material, they help us to label our collection, etc. And then I think I'm coming to the last slide, introduction visits in the library. This is maybe one of the most important ones. Projects we organize in Brussels. I think on a monthly basis we meet easily a dozen of groups in our libraries for a first visit. Many of these people, like Rafiq and Issam, this is a first visit to a public library. People who just arrived or are in Belgium for only a limited number of months, maybe years. We feel, and their teachers feel, that a visit to a public library is actually quite interesting because it's showing what the library could be for them, that there is like a collection in the language. We're still working on this, but in these 3 libraries with an Arabic collection, we see that introductions with people, Arabic-speaking people in the group, they're quite successful because these people see that there are books in their own language. It's very important to have these people visiting our libraries because we can talk about activities, about these conversation tables, about the special books. I forgot to mention in the previous slide, special books to which Saskia referred as well. It's like easy readers in Dutch with the DAISY version. DAISY actually pops up in a number of our projects. At the book gang, for example, we had some experiences in the past to have book gifts in the DAISY format as well. During our introduction visits, we can show people in the library that there are books for the beginning level and a DAISY version as well. The main message we want to give to people during such an introductory visit is that, well, this is your library. Feel welcome in your library. And then, if I remember right, that was the second last slide. Actually, this is this is the second last. If there's one main conclusion I want to draw with you today, then it's really not that much what is written on the slides, but maybe the following one. We found out that it is extremely important, and once more, nothing revolutionary, but we found out that it is much more important to do activities, to set up projects with the people instead of for the people. Yeah, this is actually, this is the conclusion I want to present to you. During these previous 4 to 5 years, with the 20 public libraries and with a lot of conversations and collaboration with different partners, we feel that this is the way we need to work, the perspective we need to follow. We try to work as much with people rather than for people. And a number of examples I have been giving you have been showing that to us, and maybe show that to you today as well. So many people were or are like waiting until their public library comes to them and asks, just asks. There's like the Dutch, maybe that's an international proverb. You're always sure about a no, but you could possibly have a yes. And this is a bit the attitude we have been experimenting with these previous years, and which proves to us to be a very interesting path to follow. That's the last slides. Questions, and anyhow, my contacts. If you happen to have questions for one of these libraries about these projects, do not hesitate and ask me, or through me, I can bring you into contact with these libraries we work for. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Stan, for sharing your interesting experience for more than I don't know how many years in Brussels and in Brussels libraries. But does anyone has a question for Stan? Okay.
Thank you, Stan. I was wondering about the home visits. Is it easy to arrange that? Is there a specific approach that you're using, or are people just very trusting and just letting you in and read aloud to their kids?
Yeah, well, that's actually part of the logistics. I referred to the fact that this project is quite intensive. Arranging the home visits, and the colleagues in the audience can, I think, would just agree with me that this is quite a logistic. It's one of the most important parts of this project. We have a close collaboration with elementary schools and primary schools who take a part of the job, like in selecting families. From the library perspective, we do not always know in which families are the biggest needs. Yeah, we have like dozens of scenarios and new attempts. We sort of try to readjust our projects, I think, year after year, because we always learn new things and we see new approaches, etc. But it works.
Thank you.
Another question?
Thank you for this interesting presentation. I have actually 2 questions. They might be a bit tricky, I don't know. The first one is, do your patrons need to be citizens of Belgium within the Social Security Code to be able to use your material? And the second question is, you said that 30% of the children speak other languages than Dutch, Spanish and French. What are those other languages? Are those the languages that you have talked about? And how do you know about the language situation? What language the patrons speak?
Yeah, these are 2 tricky questions. For the first question, actually, I may need some help from the colleagues in the room. I do not think that the ID card is the sort of CSAM, open your doors to the libraries, but you need some sort of documents. it's not the Belgian ID card, so no problem if you have whatever ID cards. But the problem sometimes is when you have no ID card at all. And then it depends from library to library what the exact regulations will be. And I'm not, unfortunately, I'm not fully aware of.
Someone from the Brussels Public Libraries who wants to.
Thank you. Yeah, when somebody comes, we just need an official document where the name is on the address, and then we just give them a library card. Actually, we're not so strict because in Brussels there are many people who are here just for a brief moment who pass to another European country. So we try to give the children access to the library and also the adults. Just in our library of the city of Brussels, we're not so strict with it. So yes, we just give them the library card.
As to your second question, home languages, that's one of the most difficult things to study in a way, because there are no, as far as I know, there are no systematic studies about home languages. At a certain point, I referred to 179 different languages. I just take a figure for whatever recent report, it was 2017 report. I just don't know how sociologists and other researchers here in Brussels come to this number. I know for sure that in the Dutch schools in Brussels, there are no language surveys, so no systematic research on what home language do you speak. On the contrary, when families go to schools and have their children place in the school, they are asked whether they speak Dutch, whether both parents speak Dutch, etc. So we know something about Dutch or French being spoken at home or not. But as far as I know, there's no systematic survey of other languages spoken. So can't say much more about this.
Thank you.
Is anyone has another question or remark or want to add something? No. A little bit of interaction. I have a question for you then. So, we are discussing, we are already 2 days in Brussels for our winter meeting, and we had some discussions about target groups also for libraries serving persons with disabilities, and we don't really agree. I think it depends on legal matters from country to country. But we are talking about the new target groups, and especially the newcomers. Also, for instance, with the email of the teacher I showed you this morning. Then I was wondering, what is your opinion? Should libraries for persons with disabilities also open up to newcomers or to persons with another home language than the language of the country they come to? My colleagues from LPD, where are they? What is your opinion about that? And Tanya, I see you smiling. You want to say something about it?
Anthea Taylor from Vision Australia. I think we, as Saskia said, we have discussed this, and from my point of view, and this might be controversial, I see that the role for the newcomers as being serviced by the public libraries. For print disabilities, I think again it depends on the organisation. If it is a government organisation, maybe there is a role there, but if it is a charity or a private organisation that focuses on blindness, low vision, and what's deemed as print disability within domestic law, that we stick with that because of our resources.
What I'm always wondering about is that producing of accessible materials costs the community or the charity, the donators, so much money, and we could use it for so many more target groups. I think it's such a waste of potential. I don't know, you don't have questions with that? You don't want to help more people? Those questions are living in my mind. I don't know. Our colleagues from Spain or the Netherlands, do you have plans in that direction, or you just waiting and providing books for visually impaired people and persons with dyslexia?
Yeah, I would like to comment on this. Rafiq from the Netherlands. And I'm also looking to my colleague from Passageers from the National Library. Of course, there is a demand from groups such as people with other languages trying to learn Dutch. There is a demand for our audio collection in Daisy. But there are also legal problems. As you know, probably that's also the case in other countries. We are allowed to use our Daisy audio collection for privileged people only, and not for other groups. So there is a huge problem with it.
Yes, but there was a legal problem too for persons with dyslexia. So we lobbied and we managed. And we convinced the publishers to open up the accessible materials for newcomers, for persons with dyslexia. So I think, yeah, we can say it's a legal matter and we are not allowed to, I'm sorry, or we can try to convince the policymakers and the persons who make the laws and to convince them to open up for other target groups. I think it's a question of wanting to and spirit, and maybe we don't succeed, but if we don't try, we certainly won't succeed. I don't know.
Kirsi Ylänne. My name is Kirsi Ylänne. I'm from Finland, CD Library for Print Disabled, and in Finland we are producing accessible books under the exception of copyright law. We already have that, and it allows us to produce talking books to persons with print disabilities. But that doesn't cover persons who cannot speak Finnish or willing to speak Finnish or Swedish. And that's a legal question, like Martin said. We have asked from the Ministry of Education and Culture that could the exception be broadened so that it would cover newcomers, but the publishers are not very interested in doing that, unfortunately. But like you said, Saskia, we could lobby this more. But what I would like to say that public libraries use a lot of money to buy books. Please use money to buy audiobooks and tell publishers that there's a great need for them, not only among elderly people but also with newcomers. That's a good way. When it's commercially produced audiobook, there are no restrictions. Only you have to solve the problem of lending them and how to lend them. And it's not just a question for special libraries. I think it's a question that the whole library network should solve and see that all people who live in the society need materials. So acquire more audiobooks, put them in your shelf and advertise them to newcomers.
Yes, and in Sweden, the exception in the copyright law is I think, quite the same as the Finnish one. It includes dementia, it includes dyslexia and so on, but it doesn't include if you are a newcomer into the language. So that's a bigger problem actually. And in Sweden, the MTN, we produce actually material. We have funding from the government to produce material, information about the society in Arabic, for instance, for the newcomers. But that's just printed material. That doesn't go into Legamus. But we also have this easy-to read printing house at Legamus, and those books, we produce them, and then they go into Legamus when they're a talking book. So we have to stick to this clear line, at least today.
Someone else want to add something?
In the United States, we have obviously very clear legislation with the copyright exceptions, and they do not include, actually it doesn't even include people with dyslexia at some level, but it does not clearly include newcomers. We are always struggling to find for our own patrons materials in other languages for them, and that's been a real challenge for us all along. But the other thing, and I think the comments that Kirsi and Christina have made are pretty relevant, because there is a growing commercial market for audiobooks, and that market is being served, is serving libraries as well as individuals, so you don't have to go and buy the book, you can borrow it. And it seems to me that the accessibility issue doesn't come into the newcomer issue, it's the language issue. So again, I would agree to encourage public libraries. And I must say that I was really fascinated with the programs that have been presented this morning, because although they may not specifically apply to my library system right now, they certainly do apply to my local library. And so thank you for those really wonderful presentations on these topics.
I apologize for my English. My Dutch and French are better. I work in a library, public library, and we have DAISY books, and we would like to give them to people, especially children that are learning our language. And I want to point out a big difference with the audiobooks, because the DAISY books, you can play them at your own reading rhythm. So that means that you can put them on a slow level and read together with the real book and hear the book at the same time. And that is really good for learning a language. And that's why we want to use them for children and for their parents or other adults that want to learn the Dutch language. And the audiobooks are not useful for that meaning. That's what I wanted to say.
I'm so happy you pointed this out, that I didn't have to mention it myself.
To that point, I would suggest that what we ought to do, because the DAISY format is really the best format there is for audiobooks, and it's not restricted to our specialized libraries, we need to get publishers publishing in DAISY format.
Someone else want to ask a question or add some remarks? I just want to come back to
in the whole discussion, well, I'm a bit foreign to this discussion, but anyhow, I think from the perspective of the projects I have been presenting, I think for public libraries it would be great if you start negotiating about the exception for the authorship for newcomers as well. I think from the examples I gave you today, DAISY could play a very, very important role in how we public libraries could even do more with and for our newcoming audiences. So I would say, go for it.
Yeah, but we managed to do some easy-to-read books to transform them into DAISY, but it was with the cooperation of the authors and the publishers. And now there's an organization, a studio, Issam, who makes diverse children books. And I really want to meet them. I already know who. To ask if we also can produce their books into DAISY in cooperation with the publisher and the authors, because it's so important. And like we heard, the DAISY books, that you can lower the speed, and it's much easier to read in the printed book at the same time. And what about the publishers? That the publishers are or should be against it? I think that's a short-term vision. Because if newcomers can't read properly in our language, then they never will buy or borrow books in our language. So we have to, it's important for them too, that they learn our language properly and that they fall in love with our authors and our books, so that they start reading also books in our language. Again, that's my opinion. Someone wants to add or something or ask something? Okay. Please, we have some time.
I'm from Dementia in Antwerp, and we already use the DAISY books in the language zone. We have a language point Dutch for the newcomers. So we use the DAISY books for those newcomers. But what I noticed is that many of them do not have a CD player, like a good CD player to play the DAISY books. Myself, I also tried it at my DVD player at home, at my laptop. It doesn't have it anymore. At my CD, I can't play it myself. So that's my remark. It's not for everybody. In that format.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good question. Most of the public libraries in Flanders do lend out DAISY players and DAISY software, but we are implementing, I think it will be in April, we will also give some information session about it, that we will allow libraries to make online bookshelves of DAISY books for their own customers in the library. So then you can put some DAISY books on an online shelf for a patron. You give him a number and his birthday is the password, and he can log in the Anders Lezen app, and with a smartphone or a tablet he can listen to the DAISY book. Just be patient another month. That's an evolution, of course. Yeah. All right. Then I would like to thank Stan and give him a surrealistic and sweet present. Here we are. So, we heard some names today, and we are together with some librarians from public libraries and librarians from specialized libraries or library organization for persons with disability. And we all know Lucas, who is 10 and has dyslexia. Maddy is 78 and has deteriorating eyesight. Bart is 42 and is blind. And this morning we just heard some strong stories of Alice and Nancy and Rafiq and Issam. And I think you know what my opinion is. I think we can make an effort to create a broader network with public and special libraries, with organizations, associations, etc. And we can use our knowledge and our experience to help other target groups of persons with a print disability, print or another disability. Personally, I would like to make some guidelines 2.0 with a lot of good practices and experience from all over the world with lots of colleagues. Guidelines or better instruction booklets for library services to different types of target groups, very concrete, not too theoretical or abstract, but concrete practices, tips and tricks to help to start services in public libraries for target groups we don't reach right now. So maybe we can discuss this at lunch. And behind you there's a table with a lot of materials from Roadbed, so you can experience how a puzzle looks like, or maybe you can smell the sea. Just I invite you to take a look. There are also other materials from us. Feel free to ask some questions. Elizabeth is also still here. And as I said, we will share the presentations on the IFLA website and on our website. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will see you again after lunch. Thank you. It's